get a break. Then it gets hard again, but not too bad. I asked everyone in my family. No one was familiar with that story with Ben Gurion and the Chazon Ish and this Gemara. Like when I grew up, this was such a big deal. This story.
I knew it from my chavrusa. Happens to be he's older than me.
Yeah,
by probably a decade and a half. So I actually heard it from him only maybe like 5 years ago.
I don't know which story you guys are talking about.
But if you listen to the recording from yesterday, the last Gemara talks about where you have two camels going on a narrow path, and it says the camel that's carrying packages gets the precedence over the one that's not carrying anything. So when Ben Gurion asked that he wanted to draft Yeshiva Bachram, the Chazon Ish answered him back with this Gemara, and he said, "We're carrying the oil of Torah and mitzvahs, so therefore you have to give way." And supposedly that's what caused the Ben Gurion to allow the system that Yeshiva Bachram don't have to be drafted.
So giving way. So what does that mean by definition? Giving way until there's actually a need for them.
I don't know. You can't ask questions. Freklish can kash yourself for Maisi. You never heard that?
Yeah, I know. Of course I know. Of course I heard that. Yeah. So I'm saying, but
I'm sure the story didn't happen the way it was told to me. That's the one thing I'm sure of.
I heard the same version. Happens to be. I heard exactly the same thing.
I've heard that Ben Gurion answered him back, "We're also carrying heavy burdens." Right? They were being set aside on all sides by the Arab armies. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Let's learn. We're up to Tan Rabbanon on Lamed Beis Amid Beis, right in the middle of the Amid. Tan Rabbanon Bezdin Yafa. You should go after tzedek. You should try to find justice. Tells you should go to a good bezdin. And now the Gemara gives a bunch of examples. Amar Acha Rabbi Eliezer Lud. Should go to Rabbi Eliezer in Lud. Acha Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai leBrar Chayil. Should go to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai in Bar Chayil. Tana. And this is now the Gemara just goes into a side note about Bar Chayil. Tana Kol Rechayim beBurni Shavua ben Shavua ben. When you hear the sounds of mills in Burni, they used to, during the times of the oppression of the Romans, they had to hide their simchas. So the way they would signal to people that there was going to be a bris, which is called Shavua Haben, the week of the sun. So when the when the mills would turn, that would signal people that there's going to be a bris. Ar Haner Bar Chayil, and the light of a ner in Bar Chayil, which is the place we just mentioned, Mishtasham. That's a sign that there's a chasana. Then once we mentioned Bar Chayil, we mentioned the signaling that they used to let people know that there was a simcha. Taner Rabbanan, tzedek tidav halacha chacham liyeshiva. Should go after chachamim to find the chachamim who was sitting and learning. They would be the best dayanim. Achar Rabbi Eliezer l'Yod, Achar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai l'Bar Chayil, like we just quoted before. Achar Rabbi Yeshua l'Pekin. Go after Rabbi Yeshua to Pekin. Achar Rabbi Gamliel l'Yavna. Achar Rabbi Kiva l'Bnei Brak. Achar Rabbi Masui l'Roimi. Achar Rabbi Chanan ben Tradian l'Sichni. Achar Rabbi Yossi l'Tzipori. Achar Yehuda Memseir l'Netzivin. Go after Yehuda Memseir l'Netzivin. Achar, we switch it. We're the second wide line in Lamed Beis Amid Beis. So it says Rabbi Yeshua, but we already quoted Rabbi Yeshua as being in Pekin, so you can't be in two places at one time. So they switch it to Rabbi Yossi B'Chanina, who was the nephew of Rabbi Yeshua. So for him, you go L'Goyla. Achar Rebbe L'Beis Sharim. Achar Chachamim L'Lishkas Hagazis. And the Chachamim, meaning the Sanhedrin Hagadol, was in the Lishkas Hagazis, was in the Sanhedrin was in Yerushalayim, in the Beis Hamikdash, in the area next to the Beis Hamikdash. Dine Mamanis Paischin. So in the Mishnah we had said, back in the original Mishnah, we said, Dine Mamanis Paischin bein l'schus bein l'chayva, v'dine nefashis paischin l'chus bein paischin l'chayva. We start off Dine Mamanis, you could start with either one, and Dine nefashis, you have to start l'chus. You can't start l'chayva. What does this mean to start? Heiche Amrina. Amr Yehuda, what does it mean? Amr Yehuda hachi yamin. Who? Mi yemer, mi yemer k'namis hechi yamin. Amr Yehuda hachi yamin. Mi yemer k'dakam risu. The judges would say to the Eidim, who says what you're saying is true? Maybe you're lying. Because the judges were told to be aggressive. They would be aggressive to the Eidim, and they'd say, I suspect that we think you're not telling the truth. So the Mishnah said, you say that, you could say that to the Eidim l'schus or l'chayva by dinei mamanis, but in dinei nefashis, you can only be aggressive, you can only intimidate, so to speak, the Eidim that are coming to be mechayev a person nefashis. Amaleula v'chasminin lahu. But you're going to scare them. What's the problem? That they would take around Eidim, they would shuffle them from one room to another, they'd hustle them from here to there, to get them disoriented, in order that they should intimidate them and get them to be chayzer. So why are we saying it's a problem that they would say this to the Eidim that they're trying to be mechayev someone? Let them get intimidated. We see that we do things specifically to make them soften them up. Saktamara, midami. No, that's not a kasha. Mimei, hasa memela kamidchu. Over there, when you disorient them by shuffling them from one room to the other. So that's, to get them to weaken their defenses, and they'll tell the truth. You're not directly saying, we think you're lying. But over here, you're telling the Eidim, we don't believe you. So the Eidim are going to retract, and they'll say the opposite. We don't want to, be so directly forcing the Eidim to retract what they said. That's not the job of the judge. The job of a judge is to judge. It's not to try to get the result that you want. So the Gemara is saying this seems to be wrong to say that this is what it means that you can start with the Eidim only l'chayev, but not the Eidim l'ptur. So what does it mean? So what does it mean when the Mishnah says dinei mamanis paischin? You start with the Eidim l'schos. You can only I'm sorry, with the Eidim l'chayva. El amar ula hachem yesh l'cha Eidim lehizamim. They would ask about the Eidim that are coming to be mechayev. They would ask the party, the person who is being mechayev in the dinei nefashos, do you have any Eidim to be mazim these Eidim? So it's not saying what you said to the Eidim themselves. It was what you would say to the party, the person who is being accused. You would tell him, do you have anything to be mazim? Do you have other Eidim to be mazim these Eidim? Amalei Rabba v'chi paischim b'schus shel zeh shisha chavasa v'shel zeh. In fact, the Gemara asks, so what? You're saying you're going to be, because let's say, right, Reuben is being accused of murder, and Shimon and Levi come in and say, that Reuven killed someone. So then what do? We tell Reuven, do you have any Eidim to be mazim, to show that that Shimon and Levi are Eidim zaymim? The Gemara is asking, so now if he brings Eidim, so now Shimon and Levi are going to be Chayiv Misa, right? Kasha Zama. So we're saying we only allow Eidim. Paischin, you try to get him to get Eidim to be mazim. You try to get Reuven, the person who's accused, to get Eidim to be mazim, the Eidim who accused him, but then you're going to cause those Eidim to be mechayev. So if we're not paisach, if we don't start to be mechayev someone, so why are we doing this? Gemara says no. Even if you bring Eidim Zaym, if Reuven comes up with Eidim Zaym to prove that Shimon and Levi were not telling the truth, they're still not going to get killed. Vatanan Eidim Zaymim neroganachi yigmar din. This is talking about at the beginning of the din Torah, right? So Reuven, the Shimon and Levi came in and said Reuven killed someone, and then they asked Reuven, "Do you have any Eidim to be mazim Shimon and Levi?" If Reuven pops up right away and says, "Yes, I'm bringing Yisachar and Zvulun to testify that Shimon and Levi were with us in Chicago when they claimed that they saw Reuven killing someone," Shimon and Levi are not going to get killed because they didn't accomplish what they had set out to accomplish. Until there has to be a Gemar Din. This is at the beginning of the Din Torah. So the Gemara says, no, of course it's not going to be a chayva on these Eidim. We're not going to impose the penalty on these Eidim Zaymim right at the beginning of the Din Torah. But you're going to tell Ruvain, go find Eidim Zaymim. And maybe Ruvain will go home, and then the day before the Gemara Din, then he'll go find the Eidim Zaymim, and then right after the Gemara Din, he'll bring the Eidim Zaymim in. And then they're gonna attack and get killed because of this announcement you made at the beginning. So it has the potential to get someone killed. So how, and what we're trying to avoid, right, with the whole point of this mission is say we only encourage the accused on Din Nefashos because we don't want him to get killed. But now we're causing someone else to get killed because of this Rahmanas. So weiter, what does this mean? Paischen by l'schus and not l'chayva. We ask him to have Edom not to be mazim, to be machash. So Edom that come to be machash, you're not going to impose that chiyuv. It's not going to be mechayiv the nefashos on the person who they contradicted. Rav Kahana b'divreichem nizdaka ploini. Rav Kahana says a whole different thing. He says, you say to the they tell the Edom that in spite of what you're saying, it's likely that he's not going to be found to be chayiv. They just want to, you want people to realize that even though these Edom came in, don't think like it's, it's sort of, it's very true in the secular courts, by the way, that once the prosecutor sets the agenda and everyone has the idea that this is, a crime was committed, it's very hard to get people's minds off of what the original understanding is. So the Rav Kahana is saying that as soon as the Edom come in, right, the Edom come in Shimon and Levi, they say Reuven killed someone. The judges say not so fast. We think it's very likely that he didn't kill anyone. So that people, it doesn't, the Edom will think about whether they said was true, and they just want to make sure that everyone's keeping in mind the possibility that he's still innocent. Abaye v'Rava dami shavayu, amrilei iloi katalta loi tidchal. They say to him, they say to the person who said who Reuven and Shimon said killed someone, they say, don't worry, if you didn't do it, you're not going to get killed. If you're innocent, we'll figure it out. So they're just reassuring the accused person that he shouldn't lose hope. Rashi says that the Paischin b'schus means just that they say if anyone has anything to add to show that he could get off, they should go and say it to us. Like we're going to see later on that maybe it means like the Talmidim, like we're going to see, like we've seen in the past, we're going to see more of. Tani Kavasa da Abaye v'Rava. I'll bring you a riot to Abaye v'Rava that at the beginning of the case, even though the Edom have come and said that he killed someone, or he's chayiv misa, the judges still say, not so fast, let's see what happens. Rabbi Yomer, im loy shachav ish eischa v'im loy shatisa, by a saita, we say, the Torah says that the Kayin says to her before she drinks the mayim saitim, she says, if you haven't done any of these things, then the water is not going to damage you. That tells you always have to start that first there's a possibility, don't be so fast, maybe she's potter. This is from the kriya that you do to a site, and we learn from that to every din Torah, like Abaye Rava said, he should start mentioning the fact that he might not be guilty. So this is so now up to the next part in the Mishnah. We were saying all the differences between Dinei Nefashos and Dinei Mamanis. So we said in the Mishnah, Dinei Mamanis machzirim bein l'schus bein l'chayva. If you come to a psak din, a gemara din on Dinei Mamanis, you could reverse it. You could undo the din. You could re-approach it even after the gemara din, whether it's l'schus or l'chayva. But Dinei Nefashos machzirim l'schus ve'ein machzirim l'chayva. You can only redo it if you find new evidence to acquit someone. But you can't find new evidence that then relitigate if someone was found to be potter, then now say he should be chayiv. The Gemara v'raminu dona sadin zikas a chayiv chayiv esazakai He asks a kasha from this brisa. It says you finish the Gemara din, and the Bezdin came to the conclusion that someone was potter and he was really chayiv, or chayiv es hazakai, or they said someone who was really should have been potter, they found to be chayiv. Times atar or tir satame. They found something that was tar to be tame, or something that was tame to be tar. Masha also asui. There is no ability. You cannot undo what was done. Vishalami beisai, and the judge has to, since they can't undo what was done, right? You took from Reuven to give to Shimon, or you found something that was tar to be tame. There's no ability to rejudge the issue. So it remains the judgment remains, and he has to pay. The judges who made this decision have to pay themselves. So this is not like this is talking about dinei nefmaminus, and we're saying you can't go back and be chayzer and return it. We're saying that the judgment stays in place. There's no appeals. So Amar Rav Yosef loy kasha. Kam b'mumcha, kam b'she'enu mumcha. It depends on whether it's a mumcha or not a mumcha. And like Rashi explains, so it's a little bit counterintuitive. So let's see the Rashi. B'mumcha, by a mumcha, yesh boy kayach lachzer. If a mumcha makes a decision in the mamanis, you can go undo it. But loy matzilu baldin ano time a comedy dachavidna. The baldin can't say no. I'm going to stick with what you had said first. Al b'she'ena mumcha matzi amalei mi yema the time basi dach ika dilma kama ika b'hai hu detois. By someone who's not a mumcha, where we're not certain enough of the psak, we're concerned that maybe no one will respect the second psak if you're chayzer. So we say that when a non-mumcha makes a din, that's the end of it. We don't want it to be constantly relitigated because he doesn't have the experience. He's not competent enough to be able to come to the final din. So we say with the maybe if you want to make it more let's say palatable, you could say that he has siyata d'shmaya in what he says first. Afterwards, he's just bouncing back and forth based on the last thought that came into his head. But a mumcha, he can reevaluate and he could be chayzer. So our Mishnah that says by dinei mammon shechayzer is talking about a mumcha. The brisa over there that says once he made a decision, it's too late, then you can't be chayzer. Masha also if Yitaka made a mistake, if someone else says he made a mistake, we can't undo the din, and the judge therefore has to pay. Menachem, you look like you're puzzling over this because it is counterintuitive. Frek the Gemara, but how can you say this? But the brisa continues. Do you really believe that by a mumcha then you could go back? That brisa over there continues, and it says we had said that the first thing we said that masha asui yishalmi beisai. Then we said, but if he's a mumcha, then he doesn't have to pay. But it sounds like the only difference between a mumcha and not a mumcha is whether he has to pay, whether he has a chiyuv to make the party who lost money, whether he has to make good to him, but not about whether we go and we're chayzer the din originally. That part stays the same. We say masha also even though he's a mumcha. So how will we understand our Mishnah? Our Mishnah doesn't seem to be like the brisa. Amar Rav Nachman kanshi yesh gadol hemenu b'chachum b'minyan kanshi ein gadol hemenu b'chachum b'minyan. Nachman says it's not just if he's a mumcha. In order to do a chazara, you have to have someone who is more chashav. Where Rashi describes it, even though this lashon of b'chachma b'minyan is a term of art, it doesn't mean that there's more people. It's a larger amount of people. It means someone who's more chashav. If you have a higher ranking judge or bezdin, which seems to be the mashmoyos of the Gemara, then it can reverse the earlier bezdin. But if there's not a gadol b'chachma b'minyan, he can't be machzor. So that's our Mishnah that said you can be chayzers where there is a gadol chachma, and the brayso over there that says you can't, that it's going to have to stay. So even if it's a mumcha, that's talking about where there isn't anyone greater to reverse the original din. Rishesh is a kansha ta b'dvar Mishnah, kansha ta b'shikol hadas. Sheshes says a different chalik. It doesn't make a difference whether you have someone greater to overturn the original verdict. The question is what kind of mistake was originally made. If the mistake was a B'dvar Mishnah, a very basic error, he wasn't aware of a Mishnah, then you have to overturn it. But Kam B'Shikol Hadas, the Gemara is going to explain what Shikol Hadas is. That's a more subtle error that can be overturned. That can't be overturned. Damar of Sheshes Amar Avasi, Ta B'Dvar Mishnah Chayzer, Ta B'Shikol Hadas Ein Chayzer. You only can be Chayzer. You can only give a new verdict if it's a mistake in Mishnah, in basic knowledge. Amalei Ravina L'Ravashi Afilu Ta B'Rav Chia even if someone made a mistake that he didn't know halacha that was said by Reb Chia and Rav Aishia, Amalei in, yeah. Afilu b'der Rav u'Shmuel, even though he didn't know Rav and Shmuel, Amalei in. Afilu b'der Divid idach, even you, Ravina and Ravashi, even if it's like us, Ravina and Ravashi, would even then that be considered a Torah B'Dvar Mishnah? Amalei atu anan katli kani ba'agba. Anan, are we working in the fields? Are we laborers? We also are learning, and if we make a psak, it should be the judges should be knowledgeable of it. And if they make a mistake on that, that's grounds to give a new verdict. Heichidami shikol hadas, and what is on the other hand the shikol hadas, something that depends on a weighing of sources of knowledge. We have a machlokes between two tanoim and amoraim. And we don't know, there isn't a stated psak like one or the other. And the judge decided to paskin like one of the two stadim, but the Gemaras or the final halacha, the mashmayis is that we paskin like the other one. So in that case, where we don't have a definitive psak, like one of the two sides, that's called the shikol hadas, hainu shikol hadas, and on that you wouldn't redo the verdict because it's not such a bad decision. Maisa bepara shel beis Menachem shenitla imshala. There was a para that they had taken out. They did a hysterectomy on it essentially. They took out the makom leida. Vechila Reb Tarfon leklavim. Reb Tarfon said it's a treifa. An animal cannot survive after it's been rendered sterile in this way. This came to the Chacham in Yavne. B'tirua, they said no, it's not a treifa. The animal could survive, and you could shecht it, and it's kosher. She'amar tudus haroifa used to say, "Ein par of a chazir yotzes malchsandri shel Mitzrayim elam kain paitchana eim shelo." It's a standard practice in Alexandria of Mitzrayim that there was never a cow or a davar acher, a chazir, that came out of it where they didn't remove its it didn't make it infertile. They didn't sterilize it first. The females, because they didn't want they had the monopoly on the best cows and the best chazirim, and they didn't want people breeding in other places. They wanted to keep the business, so they would always sterilize them before they left. But Weiss says obviously they were going to survive if they were selling them with this defect. Kadesh Taylor, they would take it off and that they shouldn't breed. So you see that they weren't treifus. Amrav Tarfon halacha holcha chamarcha Tarfon. The Tarfon says, "Oh, I've lost my chamar," meaning I'm going to have to pay up. I paskined that it was a treifa, and therefore the person just killed it and gave it to his dogs to eat. But it was really a valuable animal that could have been eaten. He could have made steaks out of it, so I'm going to have to pay him back. Amalei Rabbi Kiva said back to him, Rabbi Kiva says, no, you're mistaken. You're not going to have to pay because it's you're a mumcha, and a mumcha doesn't have to pay, like we had said all the way before. We said that Masha Asli Vishalmi Beisa, but then in the Sefer we said, but a mumcha doesn't have to pay. But the Gemara asks, V'isa, if it's as we were saying, that it depends on Shikol Hadas, or Tob B'Dvar Mishnah, Leimele Toy B'Dvar Mishnah Ata, B'Toy B'Dvar Mishnah Chayzer. You should have said to him, you're not going to have to pay because you could go back and say that I paskin incorrectly, that the psak, and you could relitigate the original psak, and then it's not you didn't actually paskin that the psak is going to go away. So the Tayyib Devar Mishnah chayzer. Sagt the Gemara, no. Chadav oid kama. Chadav the Tayyib Devar Mishnah out of the Tayyib Devar Mishnah chayzer. Ein chanami. This story, Rabbi Kiva also holds that a Tayyib Devar Mishnah is chayzer. But he was just saying a second reason. V'oid inami b'shikol adas toas. Even if it wasn't a Tayyib Devar Mishnah, it's only shikol adas. Mumchel Rab Matav Mumchel Rab Potem L'Sham. Now the Gemara doesn't say why is it a Tayyib Dvar Mishnah, but Rashi brings that there's a brisa that says the same din, that a treifa animal animal missing its womb is not a treifa. Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak Rav, my kamoisav Rav Hamnuna Rav Sheshes mipara. How could you ask a kasha from this case of para and say that it should have been chayzer and therefore he wouldn't have to pay? Para harechilu leklavim, the lesser that they had it. You want to say you could make a new din Torah on that para, but that para was already cut up and fed to the dogs, so you can't make good on it. So if you say ein chayzer alma kam dina, so the din Torah already happened. So then hainu to come after Reb Tarfon. That's why he had to say if it's a tabed anishra even the ilu have a para dinach lav dina v'loy klum avata hashanami loy klum avata. He says that even if you say tabed anishra chayzer, Reb Tarfon would not be chayiv for the outcome of what happened from his psak din, because the other person went based on his psak din and cut up the animal. He's only a grama on that. The person could have held on to the animal and waited. Now he definitely caused it. Reb Tarfon caused that the animal should be destroyed, but he's still not going to be mechuyev to pay back in that case if the din is that it's chayzer, because that which the person lost his money after the chazara. Either whether the person, regardless of whether there's a chazar or not, you can't actually be chayzer on the din Torah because it's too late. But since we would be chayzer, Reb Tarfon, who paskin incorrectly, if it's something that's roy to be chayzer on, he would not be chayiv because it's only a grama what came out of that psak. Rav Chizda and Amar. So now we're going back to the to the shaila of the stira, that on the one hand, we said what was the original thing? Whether Shikul Hadas, I'm sorry, where we say whether our Mishnah said that on Dinei Mamanis we are Chayzer, and we brought the Mishnah in Bechairis that says on Dinei Mamanis you're not Chayzer. Tiras Otam is a Masha Asi. We said even by a Mumcha it's also Masha Asi. So Chizda gives a different teras on that. That which we say that we're not chayzer is where the judge took the actual money from one party and he gave it to the other. So that's a finality to the entire, and it makes it that there's no possibility of chazar. Constantly not of v'nasam biyad, but where is not of v'nasam biyad, then chazar is possible, like our Mishnah. So Bishlam Chayiv is a zakai. So what is this? I understand this. When you said someone who didn't have to pay, you said no. You Ruvain. Even though, as we're going to find out, the Gemara that like they found out later in the Din Torah that the judge was incorrect. The judge says no. You Ruvain do have to pay to Shimon. So then Elazika Sachayiv. If Shimon was saying you Ruvain owe me money, and the judges said no, Ruvain doesn't have to pay, and then they were found out to be wrong, then there was never nasam v'natal biyad. There was no money passing hands. So how could you say that that's the reason why in the Mishnah in Bechairis we say it's ein chayza because it had the finality of being passed from hand to hand, but there was no money going from hand to hand. There was no exchange of funds. So like the Gemara, keeping the Amar Potter at Kamosha Nasal Natal v'Nasam biyadami. Where it says no, since it said Potter, that's treated as if he took it by hand. In that case, it's the other way around. When the judge didn't actually take it, that's a laxness in the din, therefore could be chayzer. But in a case where there's no money passing hand, then it's always considered like the judge did it by hand. Gemara asks, our Mishnah said that you are chayzer. Dine mamanis are machzer. There is a chazar, whether the schus or the chayv. Bishlam the schus mishkachas b'amalei mikara chayevata. We find by schus, l'schus, that originally was chayiv, and now he's saying he's pata. Then in the beginning he said chayevata, and he didn't take it. Chayevata v'lei nata v'lei nasim biyad, and he didn't take it. So in that case you have a chazar. How do you have the other way around? If we're saying that every time he says you're potter to pay, that's considered as natam and natal biyad, and therefore there's no chazar. So how does our Mishnah talk about that l'chayva, when he's found l'chayva, that it should be machzirin? It's always nasan v'natal biyad, the way we just said it. And that is chayva. The Mishnah doesn't mean to say two cases, that you can be machzer bein l'schus or l'chayva. It means you can be machzer l'schus because that is a chayva. The Gavase gabin afashim. Okay, that's the teretz. Even though it's a chayva to the other person, you still can be chayzer it in spite of the fact that it's a chayva because it's not considered natzam and natal biyah. Zok the Gemara. What about the second part of the Mishnah that we said in Dinei Nefashis? You could be machzer l'schus, but you can't be machzer if someone was found innocent. You can't be machzer at l'chayva. Machzer and l'schus, schus greidas. Avei machzer and l'chayva, l'schus shehi chayva chayvasa. So you have to say the same thing, right? That just like we said, legabi the dinei mamanis, they can be machzer to both ways, but machzer and l'schus, where it's only a schus for when no one is included, like because we just said that we disregard the other side. Ve'ein machzer and l'chayva l'schus shehi chayva. That's talking about also by schus shehi chayva, which is the way we explained by mamanis. But what does that mean? Chayvasa demand. Who is going to be chayiv when you say someone else is potter in dinei nefashis? That has nothing to do. He's the only party here. Halech lavashta chavasa de goyel hadam. Gemara means that where there's a goyel hadam, so in that case he's going to. That means there's another part. The victim's families. They're really the people who are being hurt when you're letting him go potter. So Gemara mishum chavasa de goyel hadam katlina leilahai. So you're going to say you can't be machzer the din l'chayva to make him. You can't say he's potter because it's going to be a chayva to someone else that the victims are going to have. That sounds ridiculous. That because they're going to be upset that he's going free. Therefore, you kill him in spite of the fact that it could be other. You could find schusim to go the other way around. But oid my bain. The Gemara says in general this explanation that we're saying that it's all one case. It's not schus and chayva. Just means a schus with is a chayva to someone else. So Gemara kasha. Ravina Amar. So Ravina gives a different teretz to answer the steers in the Mishnah here in the Mishnah in Bechari. Shahayla biyadei mashkin, but not limimenu. When it says that he's by mominus, he's going to. How do you have a case that the judge says he's going to be potter? He's potter and he's noisav and noitam miyad. It's talking about where he says Reuven doesn't have to pay Shimon, and therefore you take the mashkin that's by Shimon and give it back to Reuven, and that's how you say that Reuven is potter. So there's a noisav and noitam miyad, and therefore there's no chazar. Timas atoy, the agi bei sheretz. And timas atar, the way he does it by hand is that he takes he said something that's tamei, which is really tar, and he took this thing that's really tar, and he said it's tamei, and he touched it to a sheretz. He said it's tamei anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. Tiras atamei she'iver ben peirosav, and something that was really tamei, he said is tar. He mixed it together with other pairs. The judge mixed it, and that's how he did it biyad. And that's how you have the cases on all the different types of dinei mamas. Okay, we'll stop over here.